I'm JohnBerry555 and today I'm continuing my series of retro reviews where I'm taking a look at Gilligan's Island. Today we'll be looking at and reviewing Season 1, Episode 4, Goodnight Sweet Skipper. So before I go into the episode, I will just say, yes, this review has, well, not my face. I am just doing voiceover. There's going to be several videos for the next coming weeks where I will just be doing voiceovers rather than face videos. That will change eventually, but right now this is going to be easier for me to do. But anyhow, let's actually talk about the episode. So this episode originally aired on October 17th in 1964. So yeah, over 60 years ago. 62 this October actually. But anyhow, so in this episode, well, the skipper is sleepwalking, and well, in his sleepwalking, he thinks it's still World War II and he's on Guadalcanal. Gilligan wakes up and witnesses the skipper, in his sleepwalking, repair a radio. Well, the radio's not really there, it's all in his dream. Eventually, the skipper does wake up and he doesn't believe that he was sleepwalking. He thinks Gilligan was sleepwalking and was having a nightmare. Later in the morning, Gilligan mentions what she was now convinced was his nightmare in front of the professor, and Skipper's like, wait a second, I know I told you that, but those details, I remember that event. And so basically the rest of the episode, because for some additional context, there's a character named Alice McNeil. We never see her, but she's apparently flying over the world and chatting with people over the radio as she flies overhead. So their idea is, hey, if we can contact her, we might be able to be rescued, but they don't have a transmitter, a receiver, yes. So, what do? Well, now that Skipper is aware of his sleepwalking, and he remembers that event where he was using a radio manual, was able to convert a receiver to a transmitter, they decide, okay, we need the skipper to fall asleep again. He doesn't fall asleep at all. He's counted sheep, he's drinking lots of coconut juice, he's tried everything. But the professor and Gilligan get the idea of tranquilizers. No, was the professor's idea mostly. So they get some from the house, they put it in the skipper's drink, and then, the skipper ends up taking 10 tranquilizer pills, sleeping pills. You know what that means? That would normally be fatal to take that many in such a short time. And the skipper sees them too, and he takes them, and that's what pushes overboard. Of course, remember, this is a 1960s sitcom. Nothing bad happens. He falls asleep, and they are able to recreate the sleepwalking, and all the castaways play roles in the skipper's dream, and they're able to get instructions. Of course, they can't quite do it, and so there's that. But guess what? Gilligan does eventually get it to work. No one believes him, and he does briefly talk to Alice McNeil, but of course he doesn't properly communicate the situation because he's trying to get everyone else, and well, he accidentally breaks the radio. That's a typical gag where rescue is inside, it's going to happen, and then Gilligan follows it up. Granted, in this episode, I will say, maybe, don't move the radio when you've been repairing it. Keep it steady. That way you don't make a mistake. But again, remember, Gilligan is in the show. It's called Gilligan's Island for a reason. He's the main character. The character who all the action typically revolves around in some form or function. But also, can I just say too, even though they don't get away, even though eventually the skipper does finally fall back to sleep and then is waking up when Gilligan's trying to get a fly. Again, a good ending gag for the episode. Another thing in this episode is, one, shouldn't the professor have already known? He didn't think it was possible. I feel like that's something, repairing a radio or making a receiver a transmitter, should have been something he knows, because that's the kind of character they're portraying him as. Is he's smart and he can do everything. He maintains the receiver later on. Now, we don't see their transmitter ever again after a previous episode. I think Home Sweet Hut maybe was the episode. Oh, Two on the Raft was like one of the last times we saw the transmitter. But can I say something too? I think the reason why they were having trouble initially with what the skipper remembered is the skipper was remembering in his sleepwalking the instructions for a military radio during World War II. Those things would have been designed differently than civilian radios because of, okay, we're in combat. They've got to be easy repair. They're also going to be the cheapest thing out there at the same time. But my main point I'm getting at is, I do think if they had like a surplus World War II radio, it would have been probably easier, only because the ease of repair that would have been needed for a transmitter and a receiver back during the war, where you don't know what conditions you're going to be in, and therefore you do not know what you're going to have to repair, so you want things as easily repairable as possible. Granted, that's just my assumption based off of the broadness of World War II and the realities of being in combat and how the U.S. military made so many stuff. Granted, they made so much stuff so that if something wasn't repairable, you just got new stuff. But that's neither here nor there. But I do think in general, though, the fact that the skipper's memories for a military radio could be impacting the success, and that's why, especially moving it for securing it, destroyed any possibility, made it impossible for them to replicate it. That is only a guess, a theory. Again, I'm taking this way too seriously. I am, let's be honest. But let's actually talk about the point. Remember, Gilligan's Island is a sitcom, a situation comedy. And the situation that becomes comedic is they have an opportunity to get rescued. There's an impediment to the rescue, that being the skipper is not able to fall asleep for him to sleepwalk again, and the professor chooses hypnosis to make sure they get the correct memory of the event that would allow them to potentially be rescued. And then through an action of basically of not quite working, and then you get Gilligan getting it to work and then following it up, you get the situation, the comedy where it all falls apart. That's a very common Gilligan's Island formula, and we'll see that in future episodes. I will say this episode, I do really much like it, but I will admit it probably doesn't have the best bits. I've already, of the episodes we've already watched, I would say some of them have better bits. Like the ending bit at the end of the previous episode, probably going to be one of my favorite in season 1. Not all of season all 3 seasons, but definitely I would say of season 1. But that's alright. Not every episode can have a great ending bit. Not every episode can be super comedic. This episode is actually probably one of the most serious ones. Like, there's some episodes later on in season 3 especially where, yeah, the situation could be serious, but they play it 100% for laughs. So it doesn't have that seriousness. But in here, this is definitely a little more serious than they typically do their events. It could be just because of the nature of having that callback to World War II and being in combat. And I do think in general, yeah, that will create a more serious tone. Though you can still do military comedies. McHale's Navy, Hogan's Heroes are just the top 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. There's several others that are set in war where you have a lot of situational based comedy. MASH, of course, has some of that, but we're not talking about MASH because we're talking that in its own series. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got for you today. I'll see you next week where I talk about the next episode, Wrong Way Feldman. So I hope to see you then.